Hello and welcome everyone back to a brand new video. Now today we are doing MotoGP games tier list. Now if you're not familiar with what tier list is, basically you make a list of whatever you want it is, whether it be McDonald's dipping sauces, favourite football teams, whatever it is. Today we're doing the MotoGP games, of course. S tier is the best, D is the worst. You bang them in, you tell people why, people get offended at your opinions, everybody's happy. Today we have the 20 years worth of MotoGP games back as far as MotoGP 2 all the way to today's present MotoGP 22. So we're going to jump straight in. I'm probably going to offend a lot of people. There's one game in particular that I know I'm going to rate probably lower than some people will, but we won't spoil it yet. We'll get in. We have them in what would you call it, probably date added in the date. So we're starting with, of course, the oldest and working way forward. The way I did this is so as we go through I can say, oh, when we went from 13 to 14 such and such changed and it got better or it got worse. So instead of just putting them in random and saying what I liked about them and stuff, you'll be able to see the kind of progression from the last 20 years worth of MotoGP games. But I've rambled on long enough. Let's start banging some games up. We're going to start with MotoGP 2. Now this game for me, I'm going to leave it here actually a second before I talk with it because I have to hold it otherwise. This game for me was my first one I ever played. Now there was more games in MotoGP 2. They made a MotoGP game on its own. There was a GP 500 game. There was a couple of games in the very late 90s that came out as well before this. But for the sake of the 20 year mark, MotoGP 2 is the first one on today's list. I played this game all the way back in 2001 on what many people will not realise was back in the day there was a PlayStation magazine, and in that magazine you were given a disc with a rake of games, load of demos, and this bad boy came on it. That was the first time I ever played it and I absolutely loved it. It was so good, the atmosphere, it was great, the kind of music in it, the menus, the riding was so fun. Now a lot of today's list is going to be made up of nostalgia and I'm going to put this one straight in at A because it was damn good. I enjoyed the hell out of it and it was so amazing because you got to ride as Valentino and it was just, as a 5-year-old, it was the greatest thing ever. Now moving on to MotoGP 3, I never played this. When you're a child, you don't really kind of buy games year in year, like you don't buy all the FIFAs year after year. You kind of get a MotoGP game and you're kind of just obsessed with that. You don't really understand that they're a yearly release thing. So I have not played MotoGP 3, including a couple of other games we'll get to. I think looking at it now, there's only 2 other games on this list. Actually, there's 3. There's 3 games on this list I haven't played, not including MotoGP 3. So we're going to bang this in at B. Basically, I don't have much feedback on this one. It was a slight step on MotoGP 2, and it was a big step away from what we're going to get into MotoGP 4 in a second. It looked pretty decent. It looked quite similar to MotoGP 2. Could say the same about the modern day ones. But we're going to put it down in the middle just because we don't really have anything to say about it. We'll move swiftly on to MotoGP 4. Now, I remember getting this for my birthday on the PS2 back in, I'm going to guess it 2004, judging by the picture of Rossi on the Goliath's Yamaha and Hayden on his RC2V1. Jesus, what is RC211V? I think it was the original V5 Honda. That took a mouthful to get out, but we're going to put this right straight in at S. Now you're wondering, why did I go with a 2004 MotoGP game as S? This game had everything. Now, if you've never played a MotoGP game, I highly recommend either trying to get an emulator and playing it or watch some footage of it on YouTube. Now I have made a video on this game. I will try and link it down in the description if I remember. I'll also link the tier list in the description again if I remember, which is unlikely. But MotoGP 4 had so much going for it. Gameplay was good at the time. They had these videos you can unlock from testing, from real life pictures in the paddock, up close with the bikes. To this day, no one has come close to this game. Everything went for it. It was just so good. The cream was good. There was a good challenge mode. There was progression where you had to unlock people. There was like a catalogue where you could buy bikes, riders, the videos, the pictures that I mentioned, and so much more. This game, 10 out of 10, magnificent. I actually miss this game so much, and I actually reckon in the coming months I will probably go back and maybe do a series on this game. It was that bloody good. So we're going to jump on now to MotoGP 06. Now, this is another one we're going to put into B because I never actually played this one. This is when they kind of moved to the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation, and I wasn't an early adapter of either of those consoles. I didn't get a Xbox 360 till 2009, which you will probably give away, which the next two games on the list I haven't played. So again, MotoGP 06, it looked to me as another decent game. A couple of years after MotoGP 4, there wasn't a 2005 game, so it looked different. It was probably the foundations for the next game on the list that's really highly rated, but we're going to put this in at B because, again, it didn't look like it did anything amazing. The graphics were okay, physics seemed decent, so again, down the middle, playing it safe. Now, MotoGP 07 and MotoGP 08. Two of these games I've not played, and these are probably the two that people always cast their memory back to and saying these are some of the best games that have ever come out in the MotoGP franchise. I'm going to put them both in at A for the simple fact that, again, I haven't played either of them, but they have like a culling facts of people wanting to always bang on about how good they were physics-wise and how overall they were just some of the best MotoGP games. So both going at the A class, and I must say, looking back, they hold up pretty well compared to some games we're going to get into in a second. So again, not much opinions on these, but thankfully everything on the list now I have played the next one, so there will be no more kind of passes coming up, and we're about to get a bit controversial with the next few, I'd imagine. MotoGP 09-010. It's pretty shit, really, wasn't it? Like, it was an arcade game. It wasn't great. There was some Scottish lad shouting at you if you went on the grass. There was like objectives you had to hit on the track. It was just really, I don't know what they tried to do, but they went really arcade with it. It was okay. That was, to be fair, right, I'm going to put this as C. I got this on the 360, and I remember going from MotoGP 4 to that, and a graphical jump, the audio, everything, the physics were okay with it, but it's just how much it came on from when I got the Xbox 360. It was amazing to me at the time. Looking back at the game, though, it has not aged well, and that's why it has a C category. But just because of the wow factor when I first got it, I'll put it into the C because it just holds a slightly better in my memory than MotoGP 1011, which goes straight in here. The game came out, and at the time I hadn't Xbox Live, so I didn't get the patch until like 2 years later, where, well, maybe not 2 years, but it was well after I'd kind of gotten sick of the game, that they updated the liveries to the 2011 season. So Rossi, Ducati, Stoner, and the Honda and all that kind of jazz. So basically, 1011 to me was just a reskin of 09-10. I was quite disappointed with it, even back in 2011, which I would have been 13. So even as a 13-year-old, I could kind of tell that they hadn't made any progress with this, and it was kind of a reskin. It looks slightly better, probably played marginally better, but for me, bottom of the tier so far. Not a great game, not much ambition with it. And as we get into the Milestone games next, this is kind of what we're coming to expect now, where the game before could be decent, and the next one is kind of below par. So we go from 2010-11 to MotoGP 13. It goes from kind of a mediocre entry level games in 09-10 to a much better. We're going to go B. I was going to go A, but it's just not up there at the moment. There is a couple of games that will slide in A later on. MotoGP 13 was a solid game when it came out, and I remember playing it, and I played the living shit out of it. I played so much of it. I loved it because, again, as growing up, it got more and more realistic. It got more advanced. The physics were better. The audio was better. The graphics were better. Everything just seemed to feel better and nicer. And there was a career mode, and this is the first online MotoGP game I had, I believe. I remember playing this with a friend of mine from school. So this game, again, holds good memories. Looking back, it does look very outdated, but it's still quite decent to play, I'd imagine. I think a B is fair. I think A is slightly too high for MotoGP 13 at the moment. Now we're going to go to MotoGP 14. Now again, MotoGP 14 is kind of like these boys here. It made a step. It definitely. Yeah, we'll give it to B. We'll give it to B because it wasn't a bad game. They made a step physics-wise. Graphically, it got better. everything kind of just made a small step from MotoGP 13. They kind of just rounded off some of the rough edges, and it was a decent game. I remember playing it a lot. I really enjoyed it, but again, there wasn't anything like revolutionized. It was just a small evolution of MotoGP 13 as we've become very accustomed with the Milestone games. So again, small incremental steps to become a much better game, and I think B again is quite fitting of what we got out of MotoGP 14. MotoGP 15, straight in at A. This was the first one I got into league racing, and to be honest, if it wasn't for this game, I probably wouldn't be sitting here making these types of videos and having the YouTube channel and being so obsessed with league racing and even the GP bike scene now that I'm a big part of. So have to give props to MotoGP 15. It was a decent step from 14. The physics were much better. Graphically, it was good. And overall, it just felt like the first proper MotoGP game. I really enjoyed it. Now, again, if you go back and watch it, you might go, ooh, that doesn't look as good. But at the time, this was a pretty damn good game. And some of you might know that I did RRL that year. That was my first ever league I took part in, Robbo's Racing League. And I had an absolute blast that year, racing against some people. You actually would see the likes of N-Jerk. I raced against him all the way back in 2015 on these games. So some fast people. And that was where I met Biker Gaming, unfortunately, for the first time, running into a 12-year-old Reese on MotoGP 15 there. So we had some fun back in the day on that. And yeah, I have a lot of positive things. Now, it wasn't perfect, that game, but it was probably my most played MotoGP game to date. Obviously, back in like the MotoGP 4 days, you just, when you're a child, you have no concept of time. So I could have played like 100 hours on this and be like, oh my god, I played it all the time, every day. Whereas on this, I think I played about, I played nearly a month's worth of it, which probably is more than 100 hours if I was going off that. So we'd call it a couple of 100 hours, 400 or 500 hours maybe. So again, can't say enough good things about GP15. It was a brilliant game at the time. Now, I'm quite torn with Valentino Rossi, the game. Now, I'm going to go S tier. I'm going to be cliche. The reason it's got the S tier, now it was between A and S 100%. It was never going to be below. It improved everything upon the GP15 category. It made the graphics better. It played better. The physics were pretty much the same. Maybe slightly different. I don't think the curbs were that bad in this game, if I remember correctly. They brought in so much additional content, and there was just so much to do in the game. The career mode was fun, and again, I really got into the league racing this year. I won RRL on it in the Moto 2 category. We did leagues and that as well on the MotoGP one. It was just so much fun, that game. And again, these lists are slightly, shall we say, I probably am leaning to my own personal feedback rather than the game was good. They are a bit biased to myself, but for me, MotoGP 16, or Valentino Rossi, the game as it was formerly known, was a very good MotoGP game, and I must say it was top quality at the time. I just had finished school. I was just after finishing what is known as my leaving cert in Ireland. The day this came out, I believe it was like June 16th, 2016 this came out. That was probably a guess and probably wrong. But I remember playing this for so long, all summer long, racing every night with friends, doing the leagues, getting so competitive into it, and getting to a decent level. And this was probably the first game that I got to a reasonably good rider and became what I am today, of kind of a decent online rider. MotoGP 15 was I go back to my first league, so I had so much to learn. And during GP 15, I turned off the race line, went to manual gears, went everything kind of more serious and more kind of professional. And then in 16, then again, we could say I kind of cleaned up my own riding and became a much more complete rider. And yeah, won a couple of leagues on that. Absolutely adored it, and probably is in my top 3 anyway. I think at the moment it's probably second to MotoGP 4. We're going to move on now to 17. Now, when 17 was announced coming out, they announced it would be at 60 FPS at pretty much all graphics, and that was pretty much all they announced for it. They didn't really announce anything else at the time. Everyone expected them to jump to the Unreal Engine 4. Every game so far from the Milestone side were made on their own in-house engine up until now. And MotoGP 17 was really rumoured to be coming on the Unreal Engine 4, and then it was announced it wasn't. and it was like, oh well, we'll have it at 60 FPS. So at the time I was like, oh no, it's going to be a bad game, it's going to go backwards, it's not going to be improved. But looking back, it's probably one of my, I don't think it's S tier, but it's probably one of my favourite games. The 60 FPS made it so smooth to play on console. They completely overhauled the audio system, and they gave some brilliant audio sounds from that game, and that was probably the start of what we have in today's games. Graphically, it was good, made a step, and again, I can just remember I have a lot of fond memories of playing online, met a lot of people on this game that I'm still friends with today, and it was just a brilliant game, and it's very, very competitive at the time. And I do believe MotoGP 17 was the first esports scene, and that was PS4 exclusive. So this was the beginning of what we know now as the esports for MotoGP all the way back in 2017. Again, big ticks in this, a very good game. I think this was the first game we had the custom teams in career mode where you can make custom bikes and riders. So again, a lot of things that we have in today's games came from MotoGP 17. So that's why it goes in at A. Just wasn't enough in terms at the time of evolution to get to the S tier, but for an A class game I think it did pretty well, and I give it a big tick at the time. Now we move to MotoGP 18. This game was the first one to go to the Unreal Engine 4, and it was horrifically bad. My least favourite MotoGP game ever. Probably. I have another one on this list here that I absolutely despise, and I just hated the physics so much. The only thing that was going for this game was the graphics. It was probably a massive. It was a massive step to 17 to 18 graphics wise with the new engine stuff. But if you go to even the modern MotoGP 22, I think 18 looks better from the atmosphere. It seems more live off the track. They had all the smoke. There seemed to be a lot more threes, and kind of just the game felt more alive, which was a real positive. The physics though just killed it for me. I could not enjoy this game. I really just kind of gave up on it very early into its life cycle. I just didn't enjoy it, and it had very understeery, unnatural feeling, and you could trail brake for days and then you tuck the front randomly. Oh, it was just a mess, that game. I really didn't like it. So again, D category for this one. It is pretty much one of the worst, if not the worst, MotoGP games ever made. Then came to MotoGP 19. Now, the biggest thing for this for me was they had a second year on development on the Unreal Engine 4, so I was imagining they might go and get a better game out of it, and they did, in fairness. It's going to go B because it made a step over MotoGP 18. The physics were a lot more normal to the average player. Now, again, this is one of the first few years of the esports, and the way the fast people rode in this game, and including next 3, it's just stupidly unrealistic the way they ride to get speed and how they go fast. So overall, this was just a bit poor, and in some aspects, but it definitely was a big improvement. That's where we get the B from. That it was a decent improvement over the previous year, which you kind of have to take a hat off and give them their B position here for that. But again, it didn't do a whole lot right, but it didn't do a whole lot wrong compared to its predecessor in MotoGP 18. And did we get director mode in this one? Was this the first with the director mode maybe? So again, there's a few features coming the next couple of games that were kind of these first trial and error ones. But for me, MotoGP 19 is a split down the middle again. It wasn't great, it wasn't terrible, but pretty solid MotoGP game of its time. MotoGP 20, I'm going to give it... Oh, I'm torn. It's going to go B again for me. A lot of people probably won't be happy with that. This is probably one of the most controversial ones. People talk about the early release and before it got patched and broken, that MotoGP 20 was the best and most realistic game ever. I felt like it wasn't. I just did not get on with this game that well. It was just so weird. This was the first where the bike started to dance around under the brakes, and you could dial it out and it wasn't unrideable, and it came more realistic again because the bikes moved more on the braking. But when the game first came out, the lap times were like 5 to 6 seconds under lap records. You could brake so late, the bike turned so good, and it felt nice to ride on, but it was just like, you could just tell it was just not realistic. And again, it just became nicer to look at. Audio got refined. So again, it wasn't a bad game, but just the physics for me weren't for my taste. They just weren't very realistic. And personally, it wasn't a great game for me. Overall, it was just kind of meh, and that's why it's kind of warranted its B position. Now, we've 2 games left, and I know where one's going to go. Motogp 21. That's going to go in the A category for me. And for many people didn't like this game. I enjoyed the physics on this game. It was just nicer overall. And this was the game that I came back to YouTube with, and I made so much content, got so many views, gained a lot of subscribers, and most of you who are probably watching this have come because of the content I made on Motogp 21. And overall, for me, it was just a fun game. I enjoyed it, and because of the YouTube aspect, I played so much of it. I kind of have to give it the A category. It's fair. That's where it should be on the list, and it's just overall, it was better in my opinion than 20, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. So, has to be an A for me. Motogp 22 is the current MotoGP game, and for me, I'm torn between C and D. I'm going to go C because, again, it's graphically is good, the audio is good, the physics are just terrible. I'm going to go D. I've changed my mind. Everything I've said so far, so the graphics are good, the audio's again slightly improved, physics gone backwards, game modes, there's just not enough content in this game, there's not enough changed. They brought in new features to this game this year, and a lot of them were broken, so unfortunately for me, it's a D category game, hence the lack of content. If you look at Motogp 21 is in the A because I made so much content, it was easy to play for me, I could just get on, play it, there was no stress in it. Whereas Motogp 22, most of you can see I probably haven't uploaded a Motogp 22 video 3 months. There is a reason for that. I haven't lost the love of doing YouTube or anything, it's just the fact the game's terrible and I do not enjoy it at all, and it is a pain to play, and that's why the MotoGP kind of scene on YouTube is really dying down, is because this game here is just very poor. And unfortunately for MotoGP 23 I should say, they have a lot to work to do. They have so much to redo, and the physics are so bad in this that I was hoping that then when they came out with the Superbike game they could get that more close to what we were kind of hoping for, but unfortunately that was a bit of a hit and miss too. So I think it's only fair that we put it down in the D. So that is it for the last 20 years of MotoGP games. So we have 2 S-tier games, Rossi and MotoGP 4. We have 6 in the A tier, another 6 in B, 1 C and 3 D. So let me know in the comments if you agree, if you disagree. Try it out for yourself. It'd be interesting to see what some people think of it. These are, of course, my own opinions, and a lot of them are biased, like I said. Some down to nostalgia, and some are just because of how much enjoyment or just the whole aspect of the game at the time. Thank you for watching today's video. If you did enjoy, drop a like down below, subscribe to see more. I should catch you all in the not so distant future with another video. Thank you for watching. See you soon.